Hi guys, Shishir here. Welcome to the first module of this week, Fundamental of Messaging. In this module, we will understand the messaging foundation blocks, the origin of it, the various components of messaging, messaging as a concept, and then the evolution of the Microsoft Exchange email server, which is the target of this whole particular week because we are trying to understand the exchange. But before we understand the exchange, we need to understand messaging as a whole and overall the concept of messaging, how the emails get delivered, etc. So here is what we are going to cover. What is email messaging? A basic definition of email messaging, just trying to give you a more hang of it. How does the email flow? So how exactly an email message get delivered? Understanding of the SMTP servers. Then we are going to talk about the mail flow between the SMTP servers. Then we are going to talk about the evolution of the Microsoft Exchange server. And then finally, we'll talk about the Exchange and Cloud, which is a subcomponent of Office 365 and actually the main component of Office 365. What is email messaging? Let's begin with the definition. Email are the messages distributed by electronic means from one computer user to one or more recipient via a network. So, simple as that. Everybody knows what is an email. It's basically an electronic message which is sent from one computer and it can be sent to one user or more than one user at a time. All right. The shortest version is that we used to send mails and letters to each other before, and then in past 20 years, instead of sending those letters in physical form, we have the option to send letters via digital or a electronic format, and that format is called as email or electronic mail. The letter used to get delivered using the physical addresses, and the emails get delivered via the digital addresses or the domain names like yahoo.com or microsoft.com or gmail.com or yourcompany.com. So, as simple as that, that is what email is. Okay, so how does the email flow? So here in this section, what I have done is I'm comparing the mail flow of a physical email with a email. And you will find that they are quite similar in process. So you compose a physical email on a piece of paper, but you compose an email in an email client like Outlook or whatever other client which you are used to do, or a web client like a Gmail URL or a hotmail.com URL. You put a physical address for a mail on an envelope. You put a digital address, shishir@fleshtechnologies.com. You put the letter in a letterbox to be delivered to the physical post office. Here, your email client submit the letter to the SMTP server, which is like a post office. The physical letter gets sorted at the post office to be delivered to the destination post office. Similarly, the electronic email gets sorted at the SMTP server to be delivered to the target SMTP server. How does the sorting process looks like? In a case of physical email, people usually look at the zip code which is on the letter and then they identify the target post office where the letter needs to be delivered. In case of SMTP server or electronic email, the SMTP server does an NS lookup for the domain name which is there, and it queries the MX record and it figures out what is the IP address of the SMTP server where this email needs to be delivered. So how does that process happen? Let's assume that this is a SMTP server. This is my PDC, by the way. So now you go here, you do a NS lookup. So that's how it will do a NS lookup, and set type equals to MX, and then you do yahoo.com. Okay, so these are the various IP addresses for yahoo.com mail servers, and your SMTP server can deliver email to any one of them, and the emails will get delivered to the person in yahoo.com. Similarly, if it had been a gmail.com address, it can get delivered to any one of these IP addresses. These are the SMTP, these are the MX record for the gmail.com, and when you resolve these MX record, they get converted into the IP address, because ultimately all the emails or any traffic on the network can only work at the IP address level. The servers and the routers and the switches, they need to know the IP address to route the traffic to the right server or to the right direction. The names are only for our convenience, and that is why DNS is so important, and you have to make it your friend. All right. So that is how the email get delivered to the Gmail SMTP server. Had it been Microsoft.com email, then it will get delivered to this IP address, and this is the IP address of the MX record. All right. So that's how the sorting happens. So the SMTP server does a NS lookup to find out where is the MX record pointing, and then it finds out what is the SMTP server to which it has to deliver the email. Now, once the physical email is delivered to the target post office, how does it get delivered? It delivered once the local post office has identified where it has to send it, it will send it to the target post office via a postal van, airplane, or a train, whereas the SMTP server will send the email over the internet to the target SMTP server. Now, target post office deliver the email to the person. Either the post office goes to the person's house and put it in a letterbox outside his house, or they put it in a mailbox which is present on the most of the time in the post office itself. Whereas the SMTP server deliver the email in person's mailbox. Now, owner picks up the mail from his letterbox or from the mailbox at the post office, and here the email client download the email from person's mailbox. Owner reads the email, owner reads the email. So do you see how similar is this process? Everything which needs to happen in case of a physical email also happens in case of the electronic email. So these two things flow exactly the same way. And look at the sorting process. This is one of the most important part of troubleshooting email issues, that these MX record needs to be available for the target domain, or the MX record or the DNS server on the SMTP server needs to be able to resolve the MX record. So I'll just give you a situation. Let's say a user complains to you that he is able to send email to all the domains. Just one domain he is unable to send an email to. So what will you do? You will look at the email address. You will find out what is the domain name. Then you can go to your Exchange server or your mail server or your SMTP server, and you can actually do a NS lookup and try to see if your mail server can identify the target's SMTP server, or it can identify the MX record. Is it getting resolved or not? And in most of such cases, you will find that the person has written an incorrect email address. Or otherwise, you might even have a problem with your Exchange server, which is like highly unlikely. But in a strange situation, maybe some stupid guy went ahead and created a host file entry on the Exchange server, because of which a particular domain has become unroutable because you put an incorrect IP address in the host file. All right, so that's one of the option. Now let's talk about the SMTP server. Now SMTP server is the actual mail server, or it is the engine which is used to deliver the emails to the people. An SMTP server is a computer that powers the protocol your email client uses when sending and receiving or relaying outgoing messages. As part of the process, an SMTP server verifies that a sender is allowed to send through SMTP, and if a sender is allowed to send and the message is deemed undeliverable, the SMTP server will send back to the mail from address. So basically what it is saying is SMTP server is used to deliver emails, and SMTP server will only deliver the email if the sender has a permission to use the SMTP server to send the email. And if the sender has a permission, and still if the SMTP server is for some reason unable to deliver the email to the target SMTP server, in that case SMTP server will send back a report which is called as a NDR, or a non-delivery report, to the from address. A lot of times you would have seen that you send an email to somebody and for some reason you type an incorrect email address, and within a few seconds you will get a bounce message, a non-delivery report delivered to your mailbox, which says something about that there is something wrong with this email address, or I can't find this email address, or something like that. So this is what it's talking about. Now, this is the way I define the SMTP server. In my definition, an SMTP server is a fast rotating Ferris wheel. Look at this. This is called as a Ferris wheel. So it is a very fast rotating Ferris wheels, and whatever you will throw at it, it will rotate it around and then throw it out at a specified target. How does it identify the target? By doing an NS lookup, which is also a fast rotating wheel, which is always looking to accept said packages. So my one SMTP server is one wheel and the other SMTP server is another wheel. You send an email packet here, it will rotate it very fast and then it will throw it here to the target SMTP server, which will accept the message and will deliver it to the local mailbox. SMTP server can be installed on any Windows server and it barely takes any space. So SMTP server is very easy to install. Don't confuse the SMTP server with the mail server. Mail server is a superset of SMTP server. We are going to understand it more very shortly. SMTP server is the engine of the mail server, alright, and that engine looks like this rotating wheel. Now let's go to the Windows server and let's see how I can install a SMTP server on it. Once again, let's go to add, remove roles and features. Okay, select the role based and feature based installation server, next, and it shouldn't be here now. Under features, SMTP server, and it will get installed other components. See, SMTP server is also dependent on IIS. So as soon as you will install SMTP, it will by default install IIS. IIS is a very important component. Okay, so you will install SMTP server from here and you'll go next, you'll go next. It will install some additional services, you'll go next, and this will basically go ahead and install the SMTP server. Now I'm not going to install an SMTP server because it will get installed by default when we will install our Exchange server, but that's one thing which you can do. Okay, let's move ahead. What is the protocol and what is the port number which the SMTP server use? Very simple. SMTP server uses Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, and that is why it is called a SMTP server. The Simple Mail Transfer Protocol is a communication protocol for electronic mail transmission or email transmission. As an internet standard, SMTP was first defined in 1982 by RFC 821. I told you in the initial training somewhere that there is a agency which define all these defined port numbers and services and protocols, and this is an independent agency so that everybody or all the companies can use those port numbers. So you need a leader. Like in FISMO roles, you have to identify someone who can do a certain practice or a certain work in the Active Directory. In our social world, we identify various leaders who define various things for us, and we as a society follow them. Similarly, there is this agency, I have forgotten the name, but I have mentioned that name initially when I was discussing ports. This agency, IEEE or something else, it's most likely something else, which define all these RFCs and define the port numbers which are to be used in IT infrastructure. And they defined it first in 1982 and then updated it in 2008 by RFC 5321 to extend SMTP additions, which is the protocol in widespread use today. What is the port number of SMTP? The default port number without security or without SSL is port 25, TCP 25. And if you are doing TLS, which is SMTP over secure channel or with encryption, then the port number which is used is TCP 587 or TCP 465. Right? So now let's discuss how does an email flow between the mail servers or the SMTP servers. I think I already explained it to you, but basically what's going to happen is that this is a Ferris wheel and this is another Ferris wheel. This is the source mail server, this is the target mail server. Email client somewhere here will submit an email to this Ferris wheel to be delivered to this Ferris wheel here. So what this Ferris wheel is going to do, first of all, it will go to its DNS server and it will ask the DNS server what is the IP address of this email domain. Let's say the email domain was pledgetechnologies.com. So this mail server is going to go to this DNS server and going to ask. And how does it do this process? Internally, it does a NSLOOKUP to query the DNS server, whatever DNS server is defined in the network card of this SMTP server, and it will ask it what is the MX record for the destination domain, in this case pledgetechnologies.com. This DNS server will give it a MX record and then that MX record will get resolved into an IP address. So this server will get the IP address of this SMTP server, the target SMTP server. Then it will establish a connection with this target SMTP server and it will deliver the email to this target SMTP server. So that's how the emails flow between the SMTP server. One more thing which I would like to add here to add the complexity a bit, or I hope you remember all the ports and port forwarding which I discussed. So if this is a SMTP server and this is also an SMTP server, this will have a local IP and this will also have a local IP. So what you will have is a firewall or a router before this. The router will have a public IP. This will also have a router here with public IP. So now this is going to query the MX record, and with the MX record it is going to get a public IP of this router, not the private IP of this server. So the email will get delivered to this router like a network socket with colon 25, which is the port number, and this router will see in its port forwarding rules where does it have to deliver the port 25 communication, and it will see it has to deliver it to the mail server and it will forward the message to the mail server and mail server is going to accept it. Okay. Now, if the SMTP server can do all this, then why do we need all these messaging server? I just showed it to you. SMTP server is a free component in Microsoft Windows, any version of Windows Server. Even in Windows 2000, SMTP server was a free component. And Microsoft Exchange, it is a very expensive license. I think there are two kind of licenses which have always been available in Microsoft Exchange. One license is called as a standard license and the other one is called as an enterprise license. Enterprise license, I think every server which you put in your organization, it is around $4,000 and US dollars, and standard license is around 1500 USD. So it is a very expensive software. Now the question is that if Exchange server is so expensive and SMTP server is the one which does all the hard work of delivering the email, then why do you need an Exchange server? Well, let me ask you this. If I give you a bare engine, SMTP server is just the engine. If I give you a bare engine and let's say the wheels as well on a chassis, would you start driving it? Because that's what an SMTP server is. You need messaging server like Microsoft Exchange or many other below messaging server for the convenience features. Like you need to attach mailboxes, you need to maintain the email addresses for the user, you need to attach more security, you need to do spam filtering, you need to have loads and loads of features which users today require. And all those comfort creature features and security and all these things that comes with the Exchange server. But the engine is SMTP server. Ultimately, email gets delivered via an SMTP server only. Now, talking about the mail server, this is just a screenshot and it says SMTP because technically SMTP server, mail server is kind of a similar thing like I explained. So, all these are different mail servers. The one which I am aware of, I have used this once. Like we were migrating a client to Office 365 and they had this mail server. Uh, of course, IBM Lotus Domino. This is very famous. I have used this when I was in IBM. iSwap mail server. It's a decent, very good product. I still sell it. It's a cheap product. So the customer who can't afford Office 365 services, I sell iSwap to them. And iSwap is still a partner of Pledge Technologies, and yeah, it's a decent product, so we sell it. And MDaemon, yep, I have heard of it. One of my clients still uses it. They love it, and it is a free product. They don't want to spend on Office 365, and they also don't want to spend on a local Exchange server, so they run a MDaemon. Microsoft Exchange Server, that's my bread and butter, and hopefully will become your bread and butter as well. So the Microsoft Exchange Server is what we are going to learn. This is our favorite product. And what else? I think I have worked on Postfix and Zimbra. Zimbra is very famous. So Zimbra is again a open source email solution, and a lot of companies who don't want to spend money on Exchange servers or mail servers, they use Zimbra. So Zimbra is also famous. I think I might have used Carrier Connect as well, but most of these mail servers I have come across and I have migrated people to Office 365 or Exchange services. But yeah, and rest of them I have not heard of them during my career. So these are all the messaging servers for you. Now we are going to talk about my favorite topic, which is evolution of the Microsoft Exchange server. It is the Microsoft Exchange which we are going to learn in this week, and this is the best email solution which you have on the planet today. Simply the best. So a lot of people love Google, Gmail. It's a good solution, but Google lives in the browser. So as long as you are doing it within the Chrome and everything in the GUI, it's good. But organizations don't do it that way. Organization needs on-premise mail service, and more than that, user needs rich functionality of our Outlook client. And Microsoft Outlook client within Microsoft Exchange combination or Office 365 combination is the best solution possible. It is the Bentley, it is the Ferrari of the car worlds. It's the best solution. Okay, so here is the evolution of the Exchange server. Exchange server, the first version were Exchange 4.0, Exchange 5.0, Exchange 5.5. This all came when I was too young to know about these things. So this was between 95 and year 2000, I reckon. And I don't know, a lot of people didn't use them for two reasons. One, they were just okay mail server. Honestly, I didn't know much about them, but even Exchange 2000, 2003, which came later, I know them very well, and they were also the okay messaging server. So I'm sure they were crappy. And second thing, this is like 20 years ago. Honestly, at that time, people were more reliant on physical papers and physical mails and all that, and emails were fancy, but they were not like highly adopted. So it is way too old, and at this time, even the mails were not that famous. Now, Exchange 2000 and 2003. This is when the Windows 2003 came in. Exchange 2003. This is when Microsoft was getting serious and was building some amazing solution. Microsoft Exchange Server with IMAP and POP protocol. We are going to talk about these protocols. These are the protocols which client uses to fetch email from mail servers. So we are going to talk about these protocols later in this training, but these were the first Exchange servers which came with IMAP, POP protocol, MAPI, and spam filtering capabilities. And Exchange 2000 and 2003 are my foundation on messaging as well. The fun fact is, like I keep telling you, that the things have remained exactly the same. I just learned Exchange 2003, and I'm awesome up till Exchange 2019. So I didn't learn any of the other things after that. I just knew the basic fundamentals of IP, network, port, Exchange server, and your life keeps going on. And you can learn all these things. It's very easy if your fundamentals are very clear. But anyway, so that's Exchange 2000, 2003. Exchange 2007 is when Microsoft actually started to become more serious about Exchange server. Like it was a very good product. Actually, I would say Exchange 2007 was a very good attempt at a very good product, because this is when Microsoft broke Exchange server into multiple roles. They created like a farm of Exchange server in which you can have servers with different roles. There was a role which is called as hub transport, which is only the in a way you can say the SMTP server, the actual SMTP server of the Exchange. Its role was to actually transport the emails. Then there was a client access role which was there. Client access role is a role or a server which was responsible for the connection which happens between the Outlook client and the mail server. Then we had a mailbox role. Mailbox role was the actual database where people's mailbox resided, all the emails resided. So this was the real database or storage. Edge server was the spam filtering solution. You can put the security and filtering in it. And unified messaging was you can put your voicemail server and your messaging server something in it. So unified messaging is not a tool which ever became very famous for from Microsoft Exchange Stable. People used to use other third-party EPBX solution for these kind of things, but Microsoft did try to have a unified messaging from here until here, and in Exchange 2019 finally they gave up and removed unified messaging. Okay, so this was their first actual attempt on creating a highly available and a robust messaging server. But as a result of that being a first attempt, Exchange 2007 was really I wouldn't say crappy, but it was very difficult to manage and maintain. It was highly expensive because you had to set up multiple servers, and it was like you need to buy a license for all the servers and so many hardwares. The cloud was not that famous at that time, so it was a bit difficult. Then we got Exchange 2010. Exchange 2010 was really good. I still have it at a lot of clients' premise, and it is working like a champ. The best thing was that it still had all these roles, but there was a ease of high availability. One of the biggest problem was the high availability of the mailbox server role in Exchange 2007, and Exchange 2010 brought something which is called as database availability group, and that made mailbox high availability very 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 easy. So Exchange 2010 did that. Then we got Exchange 2013. Here Microsoft started to reduce some of the roles. So what it does was it removed the hub transport role, and it merged the hub transport role with the mailbox server role. So now you don't have to install the hub transport role, which is the actual role which is supposed to deliver the emails, on a separate server. It got involved, or it got merged with the mailbox server role. So Microsoft was kind of going back to Exchange 2000 2003 kind of a model where everything used to be on a single server, but not yet. So here they merged the hub transport role. In Exchange 2016, they basically combined all the roles again. There is only two roles now. One is edge role and the other one is a mailbox role. So mailbox has CAS and mailbox has hub transport. So it has further been simplified. And let me explain that edge is a optional role. The for the basic functionality of the email services, you just need a mailbox role so that the mails can be stored in a database, CAS role so that the client, Outlook client or phone client or whatever other clients which you have can talk to their mailboxes, and then you need a hub transport role which is the actual email delivering or the SMTP server. So you need these three roles. Edge and unified messaging were always optional role. Unified messaging was only required if you really want to sync up your EPBX and phone voicemail with Exchange, and honestly I never had to do that in my life. And NH server was only used for mail protection, and usually people don't use Microsoft Mails protection. There are a lot of good mail protection or spam protection solution available from good security companies like Symantec and Barracuda and few other, and people use them. We are going to discuss about the email security in later part of this training, so you will know more about what I'm talking here. And the Edge was once again not a very famous role, but I have installed it in certain organization, and yeah, it's all right. But unified messaging is something which I have honestly not seen anybody using. Now, Exchange 2016, they are kind of going back to Exchange 2003. They have combined all the roles. There is only a mailbox server role and the edge role. Edge role cannot be combined with the mailbox server role because edge role is supposed to be an external email collection server which can collect the emails from the public, from outside internet, and it can deliver the email to the internal mail server. So it is like a guard on the gate. So that's why you can never have the edge server. So you have an option to not have an edge server at all. If you are willing to set up a direct port 25 forwarding rule from your public router or a public IP address to your mailbox server, then it is fine. You don't need edge server at all. But if you want to prevent a direct communication with your mailbox server or your exchange server on port 25, then what you can do is that you can deliver emails to edge server, and then edge server will deliver it to the mailbox server. So it is like an intermediate soldier or a server which can deal with the external world. Again, it is optional, and some people install it, other people don't install it. In Exchange 2019, once again, Microsoft gave up the unified messaging role, and other than that, it is pretty much same like Exchange 2016. So as soon as I started to see, just a funny story, that from Exchange 2013 onwards, they reduced one role. And I kind of already knew or read somewhere that they are going to dissolve the other roles soon as well. So I had this thing in my mind, like I just thought that, like in fashion, it always repeat itself. So I don't know how many people know or if I'm using a correct term, but in 1980 or 85 or 1990 even, there used to be a fashion of really skinny pants, and there used to be a fashion of bell-bottom pants where the pants used to be really wide on the bottom, and then gradually after 20 30 years later, you will again start seeing the similar fashion trends coming back into the system. So there is a circle which keeps going on. So I know it's a very crappy example, but that's what I felt when I saw that they started from a single role server, and then now they have again gone back to a single role server. Anyways, that's just me. You can ignore this joke altogether if you don't want to remember it. All right, so what's next in the evolution? It is Exchange and Cloud. So after Exchange 2007, Microsoft started working on something which is called, which used to be called as BPOS, as Business Online Productivity Services. And then when Exchange 2007 in cloud, and BPOS was basically email in cloud, Exchange 2007, when it got upgraded, the cloud version of email, which was maintained by Microsoft, they upgraded it to Exchange 2010, and they did some other feature updates in it. And then at that time, they started to call it Office 365. So that's somewhere around 2012 that they started to call it. And around 2010, they, or 9 maybe, they brought BPOS. So that's what Exchange in Cloud is. And this is Microsoft's most famous solution till date. And 99.9% organization, I believe they are using it nowadays. So once again, the same thing which I said, around year 2010, Microsoft decided to offer their software as service solution named BPOS, Business Productivity Online Services. The same product was later renamed as Microsoft Office 365. The initial offering of BPOS included Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and Lync. Lync is their messaging solution. And later, Office 365 is an ever-evolving product with lots of offerings. So, of course, it still have Exchange, SharePoint, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and there are 20,000 other products. Like every night they add something new. It's really on my nerves that they keep adding so much technology into Office 365. The primary reason for these cloud offering was that most small businesses didn't have the money or resources or even the reasons to maintain on-premise servers. So, like I told you, that Microsoft offered these on-premise solutions, and a lot of businesses used to set up their own mail servers and maintain their mail servers for delivering the emails and all that. But this was not something which all the businesses were willing to do, because it is difficult to do work like that. Like you have to maintain a server, you have to take a backup of the server, and these things were very difficult. So businesses used to avoid it. And then on top of that, the licensing for this Exchange server were very, very expensive. So a lot of businesses couldn't afford it. So Microsoft saw the need to provide offering to these customers on a per user cost. So basically what Microsoft thought, instead of taking a wholesale cost of a license for an Exchange server and then they need to spend money to manage and maintain those servers, why not I offer them something in cloud and then I take a monthly fee from them based on the number of users which are there in an organization. So now, what happens in Office 365 is that you can buy a single license if you are a one user company, or you can buy 2,000 licenses if there are 2,000 users, or you can buy 100,000 licenses if there are 100,000 users. But in all the cases, everything remains in cloud and you get the same level of service, whether you are a one user company or whether you are a 20,000 users company. Microsoft Office 365 is Microsoft's most successful offering till date, and they are sure to make a lot more money from it in future. All right, so that's Exchange and Cloud. That's it for this module, guys. Here is what we covered in this module. We spoke about email messaging. We just defined it. I told you how the email flow. We did a comparison between the physical mail flow and the email flow. I told you what is an SMTP server. It is a Ferris wheel which is rotating really, really fast, and whatever emails you throw at it, it throw it on the other Ferris email. It throw it on the other Ferris wheel, which is again another SMTP server. I explained to you the mail flow between the SMTP servers. I just spoke about it. Then we discussed the various flavors of Microsoft Exchange Server, and then finally we discussed about the Microsoft Exchange and Cloud, which is O365. Now, here are your action items. So, you should install SMTP server on your file server, and then you should study the EHLO process and send email from SMTP server. So what I'll do is I'll create a separate video to show you how to follow the EHLO process to send email from SMTP server.